Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. Ever since the Indian Express broke the story about an army inquiry into operations of a special unit set up by former Army Chief General VK Singh last week, the story has become larger and uglier. General Singh has subsequently gone on a speaking spree, challenging the findings of the inquiry and the newspaper report first, and then going on to virtually admitting most of what the report said. His most shocking statements during his statement spree in the last week has been about the army paying ministers in Jammu and Kashmir for a long time, which he later sought to correct it by saying it was not a bribe, but for spreading goodwill among people. His later comments about IB and its functioning and use of funds by it, and also his statements that Panchayat elections in Kashmir was a victory for the TSD, that the unit which he has set up, have all been shocking. Meanwhile, the government has made some tentative statements about action being taken against the guilty. The question, however, is whether General VK Singh has compromised the national security by his statements, and if so, what needs to be done. We will discuss all this today with Ajay Prasad, former Defence Secretary, Government of India, Arun, Bhagat, former Director, Intelligence Bureau, Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan, retired Vice Chief of Army Staff, and Sandeep Dikshit, Senior Assistant Editor, The Hindu. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Ajay Prasad, last week when we were discussing this, when just on the day that story had broken out, there were several question marks and we were still very tentative. We were talking about an inquiry which needs to be held. But it has gone much further than what we spoke about last week. Do you think that it has become a serious national security issue now?
Oh yes, undoubtedly. And as I said the other day also, I feel now the matter is such that it is no longer confined to General VK Singh as an individual.
Right.
Its ramifications now go well beyond that.
Yes.
And has put the whole government of India and particularly the army in a very strange light.
Right.
And is creating doubts in the minds of many people. I think what needs to be done now is to have a very comprehensive and a thorough inquiry to settle these issues.
Right.
Because the sooner the air is cleared, one way or the other, either it should all be disproved, saying that this is all a pack of lies, or it should be substantiated and action taken against those who are culpable.
But why do you think the government is being a little tentative? Is it justified that the way the government is taking very slow steps? They are not coming out openly about anything. They are and they are not coming out. Nobody is speaking on record except off the record briefings by very senior officials. Do you think there is some justification in the way the government is addressing this issue at this point of time?
You see, I feel that this is an extremely sensitive matter and does nobody any credit.
Right.
And therefore, the government would be very circumspect in proceeding with processing this kind of a report.
Right.
And government would definitely have preferred that the whole matter is under wraps.
Right.
And not brought out in public domain at all.
Right.
But now that it has come, and it comes such a big way,
right,
therefore it becomes now necessary that we must get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
But then the question, let me add here,
yes,
the question also starts as to who is to do this inquiry.
Exactly. That's where the problem seems to lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. General Kadyan, last week, you were still, having giving some certain leeway to the general, saying that, the inquiry needs to be done. But how do you see his own reactions in this last 1 week?
Girish, there is a very famous proverb which says that when you surround the enemy, you should always leave at least one route of escape open.
Right.
Perhaps that principle got ignored. The general felt that he's been pushed against the wall and there is no escape.
Right.
His reaction could have been on two planes. One emotional, other is rational.
Right.
your first emotional reaction when you are confronted with allegations which you are convinced are patently false
Right.
is of anger
Right.
and of a desire to hit back. I think he gave in to that emotion. The rationale would have been for him to say, all right, these allegations have come. They are totally baseless. I don't accept any of these. However, if I speak publicly, by virtue of my having been the army chief, I am privy to certain information, the disclosure of which to public is against national interest.
Right.
I therefore request the government to do an in-camera inquiry, including the aspect how the leak took place.
Right.
And I'll fully cooperate. I think he would have gone up very, very high in the stature.
So you think that by doing what he has done, by going on a speaking spree, making allegations recklessly, and also he has opened a can of worms, and which not just affects him, it affects the entire morale of the army. Do you think so?
Yeah, it has embarrassed the country. It has also to some extent compromised the state government.
Right.
And it has caused great discomfiture to the army by putting under shadow the army's long-standing loyalty, patriotism and apolitical character.
Absolutely, the apolitical character. That is what was the most important thing as far as Indian Army was concerned. Mr. Bhagat, you think that the apolitical character of the Indian Army has come under a serious cloud now?
Well, I don't think so. You see, if you look at the whole thing, it pertains to a particular area and very different circumstances
Right.
and situations. So I wouldn't say that, but I do feel that what has been going on is you are cutting your nose to spite your face. I mean, it doesn't make sense at all. I mean, yes, you do appear on the TV, you are interrogated, you are coerced, but don't get bullied or trapped. That is baited. That is what has happened, unfortunately. And I'm sure it was not the intention of the general. And in any case, if certain allegations have been made, that there's no proof about it, and these allegations are hurled day in day out against virtually everybody who has held a high office or is holding high office.
Right.
So I think the reaction was not called for. And certainly there are many things that you come to know when you are in high positions, and you can't make public disclosures of all of them, because some you deal properly, some you do not deal properly, but that is part of the game. That is part of the complexity of the situations which you have to deal with.
Yeah, incidentally, General Singh has also made some right comments about the IB and the way the IB, IB's funds are used and things like that. These are, you think these were things which could have been kept to himself, and also by, he is also casting aspersions on the IB now.
Well, you see, IB is responsible for covert work.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
Right.
It is mostly undercover work which we carry out.
Right.
And in this, for that, anywhere in the world, they have to use different methodologies. And one of the useful means of extracting and obtaining information and intelligence is money. So yes, it is used. I mean, it is nothing new. So casting aspersions means, yes, maybe it did not serve the particular purpose at a point of time which the general came to know about it. But that is part of the risk of the game.
Mr. Bhagat, is there in a state like Jammu and Kashmir? I'm asking this question with full responsibility, and I understand, and I expect you also will, hold your horses wherever you need to. But the thing is, how much does IB and the military intelligence, what kind of a relationship do these two have at the in a border state like Jammu and Kashmir? One. Second thing is, when the general says that we have been paying money to the politicians, the ministers since independence, how do you view that?
You see, about the first part, there's excellent relationship as far as the MI, at least during the time when I was there and even before that, and I know a little after that. Now,
Yes.
of course, I'm not in so much in touch with that, with my old organizations. But it was excellent. As a matter of fact, the DGMI used to walk over from the South Block to the North Block. And we used to have a cup of tea, we used to have a cup of coffee and discuss various issues over long periods of time. So the relationship is excellent. Now, as regards the second point, you see what happens is that every unit, whether it is a battalion or it is a brigade or a division, it has certain funds, you know, for exercises. Let us say that they are camping in a particular area for exercises for a period of 15 days. Now they are at some distance away from the road. They construct the road. And whom do they ask to construct the road? They ask the local people.
Right.
So they pay them. And in return, if there is a well which needs improvement for water for them as well as for a later benefit to the particular village or the people residing there. You know, so these sort of things, there is money which is made available.
Right.
But about the other thing, I mean, what the army does and where it got the money from, I mean, that the references which was made by the general, I have absolutely no idea.
Yes, General Kadyan.
You know, as the newspaper exposure that came out on 20th September only made some alleged irregularities or
Yes.
misuse of intelligence funds.
Right.
But the debate subsequently shifted to the use of funds for civic action.
Civic action, political action also, not just civic action. When he says that, you know,
No,
we have paid money to stabilize the situation in a troubled state, what does he mean?
That's very unfortunate, whatever has been said. I'm not alleging. I'm just saying that ever since the insurgency started in Nagaland, first in 1950s,
Right.
Army has been doing development work.
Yes.
In hinterland where the state government doesn't have adequate reach or because of security reasons they can't go there, Army has been developing.
Right.
But those funds are separate. There is no allegation of their misuse. They are
Absolutely.
open funds. I mean, if you build a road or a bridge or playground, there's no secrecy about
There's
it.
no secrecy about it.
And those funds are accounted for. They come from the Home Ministry to the defense. They are book transactions.
You don't have to use secret service funds for that.
No, and that money is never paid to any individual. At least
Exactly.
I have operated in the Northeast. J&K situation may be slightly different. I will not comment on it. But we never paid money to any individual, any minister or any bureaucrat. These projects were executed directly by the army.
Exactly. Okay. Coming to you, Sandeep. Sandeep, how do you look at this whole thing? How do you think the Kashmir policy, as far as the government of India is concerned, has been affected by these revelations and these statements which has been made?
First of all, adding to what the three gentlemen have said, very excellent statements just now.
Yes.
There are two things that shouldn't have been done. One, the government shouldn't have let the matter roll on when General VK Singh was the army chief and a lot of things were coming out.
Right.
There should have been decisive action at that stage itself.
Right.
And second, General VK Singh himself shouldn't have ventured into this murky world of politics and tried to bat on his own. So these are the two things that have impacted on the controversy. And third, of course, is the troubled relationship between General VK Singh and the owner of a certain newspaper which made the allegations.
Yes.
You have General VK Singh's Twitter handle. You can go and see the tweets that are there against
Yes.
that. So there is this battle going on.
He seems to be very upset that this particular gentleman went to his house, had lunch, and then wrote about it.
And as for the J&K policy, well, it's no revelation because there have been various vicissitudes. You had the Pathri Bal encounter, for instance, in
Yes.
which the army was indicted.
Right.
And then you had the Hill Kaka encounters, for instance.
Yes.
So people of Jammu and Kashmir have become largely immune. And you remember Kukpare, I'm sure, the MLA who used to organize
Yes.
cricket tournaments, who was killed, in fact, while
Yes.
watching a cricket tournament.
Yes.
And that was a cricket tournament that was financed by the state.
Right.
I mean, by the army or by the other units. So this is a time-honored tactics by the army. They call it hearts and minds. They call it various other names. So, it's not out of ordinary, or it's not as if the entire J&K politics has been shaken because the army has said so. And as General Kadyan put it so well, there are places where the civil administration has collapsed has retreated, has rolled up, and that's where the army tries to build up its linkages. Now, whether that is good or bad, whether that's sustainable in the long term, that's another matter itself. So on the J&K issue, I don't think there is so much of an impact. I think the reverberations are going to die out in a couple of days. But what, as Mr. Ajay, Prasad and others have pointed out, what is more unsavory is a former chief of army staff making charges, allegedly making charges again, about his former organization. And that is what rankles a bit.
So you don't think that there will be a long-term impact, a negative impact on Kashmir?
No, as General Raj Kadyan was also saying, in the northeast, for instance, is a time honor tactics, and similarly in Jammu and Kashmir.
Sandeep, I'm specifically asking about the statements made by General VK Singh about how they had managed the panchayat elections, how members in the ministers in Jammu and Kashmir have always been paid since independence. Don't you think these are issues which can seriously damage and the reputations of the
this is
people?
what General VK Singh has alleged to have said. But if you go to Jammu and Kashmir, if you are in Srinagar or in other areas, there are no qualms or there are no secrets about where the dividing line is, who's on which side and who is doing what. So these are all open secrets in Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, it could be a revelation to the man on the street in Delhi or elsewhere, but for people who are practicing it, like all your speakers, or people who are observing this statecraft unfold in Jammu and Kashmir, it's no surprise at all.
Mr. Ajay Prasad, do you agree with that?
Partly, I would agree with what has been said, but I have a slightly different take on this. And that is that it is not the mandate of the army at all to get into this kind of an activity. Absolutely. Now in Kashmir, we have been talking about a major activity that army has undertaken, and that is the Sadbhavna program.
Right.
And that is what General Kadyan was also referring to, where you supplement or replace the civil administration where it has failed to execute to establish its presence.
Right.
And therefore schools have been built, dispensaries have been run, bridges, roads, etc. have been done. Now these are all overt operations.
Absolutely.
Funds are earmarked, budgeted, spent, audited. There's nothing covert about this kind of an activity. Army's mandate is MI's mandate that we were discussing a little while back,
right,
is to collect some tactical and some counterintelligence for preventing infiltration, to protect our borders.
Right.
It is certainly not its mandate to start paying politicians or others for stabilizing the situation. It's far beyond the remit of the army. And therefore, and as far as my personal knowledge, I have never heard of army indulging in this kind of an activity in J&K. So I'm very surprised to find this kind of an allegation being made now.
You were the defense secretary. During your time, there was no instances which had been brought to your notice that something like this was being done? Mr. Prasad? Mr. Prasad?
Oh, sound chilly.
Mr. Prasad?
I can say so.
Sorry?
If I can add.
Sandeep, okay.
I think we are not being too frank and too honest. In fact, if you look at the role of the Indian Army in counter-insurgency operations since 1950, as has been pointed out, they have been going beyond what Mr. Ajay Prasad has just mentioned, and it has been blessed by the officials and the ministers in the center and everyone in power. As the Assam Chief Minister yesterday said,
yes,
Mr. Tarun Gogoi,
right,
he said the former Army Chief, when he was the Eastern Sector Commander, he had talked a lot of things which he would not like to mention in public because it will embarrass him. And he said these such matters should be kept under the hat and not brought out in public, because there are two sides of the coin over there.
No, but Mr. Bhagat, you think that these are issues which should be kept, but as Mr. Ajay Prasad rightly pointed out, what is the mandate of the military intelligence? Is it or this special unit which was set up? Its mandate is certainly not to give money to politicians directly.
Oh yes, I mean that is very clear. That is out of question.
So why
I mean,
should? So is there a need for us to be very shy about it and not discuss these things and brush it under the carpet, even as some people seem to suggest?
no, brush what under the carpet? I mean, it is out in the open. The only question is how long do you want to prolong it?
Exactly.
And what will you get out of it? Further, you see, it has been incidents which we cannot acclaim or cannot rejoice on.
Absolutely.
But I think it's time that we get over it, and I hope it is a lesson to many others that it is always better to be prudent and not volunteer or get bullied or baited into giving information which will create problems for you as well as cause a slur on the office that you have held.
Absolutely. Mr. Ajay Prasad, one question to you before I come to Raj Kadyan. How relevant is this now demand that, to inquire into who leaked that report, why it was leaked? Is it as relevant as the other issues which have been raised now?
No, it is relevant because if a secret document goes into the public domain and gets published in newspapers, it is certainly a matter of concern and it should be inquired into. Okay. But it's a part of the overall inquiry.
Right.
As to the contents of the report of the General Bhatia's report and the various allegations and counter allegations that are now flying around thick and fast, I think that's the more important aspect of the
Absolutely, that's the more important aspect, and initially what many people thought was just a figment of imagination seems to have been played out in the open and admitted by the general himself, though the interpretation is different. Yeah, Mr. General Kadyan, you think that the whole issue can get sidelined if there is so much focus on why the report was leaked and how the report was leaked?
I think that issue is very important. The initial problem started with the leak.
Yes.
The person who has leaked, General VK Singh himself has pointed his fingers to some individual.
Yes.
And that was obviously a personal vendetta against General Singh for whatever reasons.
Would you go to the extent of agreeing with General VK Singh that it was that individual himself who has done it, whoever it was?
I think that is treason. To leak out such a report is against national interest.
Right.
That is absolutely treason. The culprit must be identified and must be punished. You see, we as a country...
One second, sorry. You're talking of treason. One of the first things which General VK Singh said once the report appeared last week was that whoever discusses intelligence agencies functioning is committing treason. And then he goes on and does the same thing.
Well, this TDS has been in the news for many months now.
So, we're not talking of TDS,
but rightly, if it was a secret intelligence unit, even its existence should not have been known to anybody other than the people handling it.
Right.
But that is too late now. We can't go back. But the disclosure or the leakage of the report is as important as what has happened subsequently. We as a government need to send out a signal to the international community that we are able to protect the secrets. If we send a signal that we have no control, then tomorrow nobody will have confidence, there will be no bilateral agreements. That no matter how secret the agreement, it will be leaked out. So it's a very serious damage that must be plucked.
Mr. Arun, Bhagat, you think that this has national security implications? Whatever has been happening?
Very serious, very serious. And I think the leakage should be probed because it has become it's quite common now for information being leaked out in this manner about all sorts of things, financial, economic, foreign affairs. So what is happening? I mean, surely the government should not become a sieve.
But Mr. Bhagat, there is also this version or this feeling that in the process of trying to probe the leak and highlighting this who and why it was done, the message, you're shooting the messenger and the actual message, the dark message which has been given out may get sidelined.
No, how will that? I mean, I don't agree there at all. You see, because why should this come out at all? All right, if there is an inquiry, there has been some wrongdoing, you take action. You don't have to tell the whole world about it.
Anyway, but one more question quickly, Mr. Bhagat. There is this. In fact, the leader of the opposition, the Rajya Sabha, Mr. Arun Jaitley, is on record. He is, in a note he has said that this is an area where CBI will not have jurisdiction to go and investigate into to whom the secret funds were paid and things like that. Do you agree with that? Do you think the CBI has no jurisdiction to investigate? Is that the problem which the government seems to be facing, because of which there is no immediate reaction from there about what needs to be done?
The CBI will have the authority to carry out an inquiry and investigation if a crime has been committed. Now, if there has been a crime, a prima facie case is there that a criminal offence has been committed, then yes, the CBI has the authority. But apart from the CBI, there are many other ways to come to the truth.
Okay. Last words to you, Sandeep. You think that the government is now preparing itself to set up an investigation? Where do you think that there is some problem there? And last and very quickly, how is all this controversy going to have an impact on the meeting between the Prime Minister of India and Pakistan in the United Nations in the next day or two?
Well, first of all, it is very dangerous for people like me to prophesize the future. But the cadre from which the officer who has allegedly leaked that report comes from, I don't think people are going to touch him, or nothing much is going to come of it. So he can't be made as an example. And secondly, as you said about...
Sandeep, 1 second. Does it mean that everybody is now at least very sure who has done this?
Not very sure. I mean, if you are discussing something on the basis of a newspaper report, we got to base something on what General VK Singh also says.
Right.
General VK Singh has really pinpointed that officer.
Absolutely.
So I don't think the cadre he comes from is going to do anything. Had it been an army officer, it would have been a different matter. He would have been tried and hung in the shortest time possible, not here. And second, about the India-Pakistan meeting between the two prime ministers. So as others have pointed out, this is a time-honored tactics by intelligence agencies of every country in the world. So the Pakistan prime minister will also naturally take it in his stride, because he's no innocent and he's seen how Pakistan also handles its various assets. So this won't cast much of a shadow at all on the India-Pakistan talks.
Okay, I think on that note we need to end. But the fact of the matter is, this is something which has really has some serious national security implications, as all my guests agree. We'll wait and watch how it will be tackled at the government level, and whether General VK Singh himself will at least now keep quiet, or he will continue his diatribe. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Ajay Prasad, Mr. Arun, Bhagat, Sandeep, Dikshit and Lieutenant General Kadyan. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another edition, Big Picture, same time tomorrow.